Good morning, Hilton Baptist. Welcome to today's daily devotion from Revelation. Today's passage is a long one from chapter 8 and verse 6 all the way to the end of chapter 9, giving us the first six of the trumpets that were sounded by the angels after the seventh seal had been opened. It's quite a frightening passage, and we'll look at it in a moment. But let me just put it in context for you so that you can see how it fits in. The sounding of the trumpets come after the opening of the seventh seal, which brought half an hour's worth of silence in heaven. And remember yesterday we spoke about the fact that that half an hour of silence was when the prayers of God's people were heard by our Father in heaven. I think it's true to say that the seven trumpets are sounded in response to the prayers of God's people. And that's quite a frightening thought, because we've already learned from the opening of the fifth seal that the martyrs around the throne of heaven are asking for justice, and we know that God is calling his people to pray, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." Lord, would you bring about your kingdom? Would you do your will? Would you bring about justice on earth? And the trumpets are sounded as a word of justice and judgment from God onto the world. I think it's worth noting that even though these trumpets bring about a scary judgment and scary things that happen, it's also important to know that this is not a final judgment. Not the whole of the world is destroyed. Not every person is caught up in the judgment. In fact, many people are rescued from it. And in the end, I think these trumpets are a word of warning to the world to repent, to change, to come back to God, and to turn from their wicked ways. Nonetheless, there are some interesting patterns to follow and some scary words to consider. Just like the opening of the first four seals, the first four trumpets are blown pretty quickly, and their impact is seen fairly quickly. Then there's a bit of a pause and there's a warning. In fact, there's an eagle that speaks out. If you thought those four trumpets were bad, wait for the next three. And the fifth trumpet is a dreadful trumpet, and worth maybe just taking note of for a bit. I think that the blowing of the fifth trumpet brings about the fall of the star, which I think is a reference to Satan. And I think he falls into the abyss, and he opens up the abyss, and all hell breaks loose on earth, and dreadful things happen. But it is worth noting that even though dreadful things are happening, not everybody is allowed to be affected. Some people are rescued from it, and not the whole earth is allowed to be scorched. Some is rescued from it. This is a very severe warning, and one worth taking heed of indeed. So, as the six trumpets sound, and we'll look at what the seventh and following in the day or two to come, when are these trumpets sounded in real life? When do they actually happen? Some people think that the blowing of the trumpets will happen right before Jesus returns, and I suppose that's possible. But I think that there's enough evidence here on earth now to suggest to us that the blowing of these trumpets is something that happens often in the world even now. They are terrible warnings of evil and awful things that happen to God's people and to the world. And there are many examples of it. We live in the midst of one such trumpet warning as this coronavirus is spreading throughout the world, and nobody really seems able to do anything about it. And we try and flatten the curve, but we can't do much else. I think when people go into schools and open fire on children and teachers, that's another example of a trumpet warning. Will you repent, or are you evil like that? I think there are many other examples that we could hear of. We hear of trumpets sounding when police who are meant to protect end up doing harm. We hear a trumpet warning in homes where fathers abuse their children and where husbands abuse their wives. These are all warnings to us. We are to repent because judgment is on the way. And so I want to ask you this morning, have you repented? Have you seen the dreadful things happen in this world? And have you asked God for mercy? He wants to bring about mercy. He gives us these warnings so that we will repent and we will turn. And there are so many stories in the Old Testament of God's people turning around and miraculous saving happening for them and to them. Just think of King Hezekiah, for example, or Moses rescuing the people of Israel from Egypt. There are so many examples of God rescuing us from these warnings. I think we also need to pray, don't we? We need to be praying for people around us who are also experiencing these trumpets, experiencing these warnings, but have not repented. Oh, that they would do so, because when the bowls get opened, when that next judgment comes, it will be final, and you don't want that to happen to you. So let's spread the good news of Jesus, because in the midst of all the evil and dreadful things in the world, Jesus has come. He's died on a cross. He's been raised from the dead. And he says, come to me, and I will give you rest. God bless you. See you tomorrow.